Mr. President, in a moment, I'm going to put forward a unanimous consent request to pass a trade bill co-sponsored by all 48 Democrats and Republicans on the relevant committee in the other body, the Ways and Means Committee, and was ultimately passed by the other body, the House, by a voice vote. So there was no opposition in the other body. And in fact, it was put forward by the Republican chair, Jason Smith, the Democratic member, Richard Neal, as well as Senator Crapo and myself over here. And I think it'd be fair to say that this kind of unanimity over in the House, where sometimes they can't agree to order a 7-Up, is pretty amazing that they passed a trade bill unanimously. So before I make the UC request on this bipartisan bicameral bill called the United States-Taiwan Initiative on 21st Century Trade First Agreement Implementation, I'm just going to talk briefly about why the bill is so important. The basic proposition is this. First and foremost, the United States Congress fully supports deepening our trade relationship with Taiwan and wants to ensure the recent agreement covering trade facilitation, anti-corruption, and small business is durable and legally sound. Not only is Taiwan a critical market for U.S. exporters, it's also a democracy that shares our values and has strong ties with Oregonians and Americans across the land. Next, this body wants to be clear that trade agreements are within the constitutional authority of the Congress. One of the ways the Senate demonstrates this is by approving trade agreements just like this one. Finally, the bill requires greater transparency and consultation as well as public review for future Taiwan trade agreements. These ideas can sound a little abstract, so I'll put it in real world terms. In a few hours, I'm heading to rural Oregon to meet with my constituents and hold town hall meetings. Farmers and ranchers in Grant and Harney and Malheur counties care a lot about trade. They want new markets to sell wheat and potatoes and the like. And I'm never going to tell a farmer in Ontario or LeGrand that they don't deserve the right to read a trade agreement and understand how it affects them before it's signed and wrapped up. Trade agreements that affect millions of Americans can't be done in the dark. Congress and the American people need to know what's in these details and how it benefits American interests. I look forward to working with the USTR as it negotiates the bigger ticket items with Taiwan, issues like digital trade, labor, environment, and agriculture, as outlined in the negotiating mandate. Further agreements need to bulldoze barriers to trade for Oregon exporters, including red tape like labeling rules and technical standards that make it hard for exporters to sell their goods. Involving the Congress and the public is going to help the administration break down these barriers. This is a proposal that brings both sides together. As I said, every member of the Ways and Means Committee, every Democrat, every Republican's on board. So the glide path to passage here was no accident, and my colleague, Ranking Member Crapo, as well as Chair Smith and Ranking Member Neal, worked with me to hammer out a bill that could receive that kind of attention. So my colleagues are eager to get back home, so here's the bottom line. Passing Taiwan Trade Agreement bill is a can't-miss opportunity for the Senate to support Taiwan, clarify Congress's role in trade, and call for more transparency and consultation. In a moment, I'm going to make a unanimous consent request. In fact, I'll make the first one to include my good friend from Idaho, Senator Crapo's statement in the record.
Without objection.
And I'm going to yield now to Chairman Menendez, the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, because he and I work very closely together on all of these kinds of issues. The Foreign Relations Committee, the Finance Committee, and we have the good fortune of having Senator Menendez essentially sit next to me in the Finance Committee. So we're going to be working together. I'm going to make the unanimous consent request in a minute, but I want to yield to Chairman Menendez, thank him for the fact that we're working together today. We've got a lot to do in the future, and we're going to work together. I yield to my colleague.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The senior senator from New Jersey.
Senator, Mr. President, I love your booming voice. I just want to come to the floor very quickly. I look forward to working with Chairman Wyden so we can forge an even stronger economic ties between the United States and Taiwan. As chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee and the Democratic co-chair of the Senate Taiwan Caucus, I can tell you that such efforts are deeply important to U.S. businesses and our economic and national security. I've reviewed the U.S.-Taiwan 21st Century Trade First Agreement Implementation Act. It reasserts important congressional prerogatives with which I agree, and I appreciate Chairman Wyden's leadership in this regard. I want to just add this point. If we truly want to help our businesses, and if we are committed to taking our economic ties with Taiwan to the next level, we have to pass the Taiwan tax agreement. Taiwan has made clear that they want a tax agreement with the United States. U.S. businesses want a tax agreement with Taiwan, but there's a gap in the law that means that can be no agreement unless there's some new legislation. The Taiwan Tax Agreement Act eliminates this gap. It sets into motion an agreement with Taiwan that matches in substance the commitments we have with partners around the world, and it does so consistent with our Taiwan Relations Act. I know that Chairman Wyden has also another aspect of this, and I look forward to working together so we can come to a mutually agreeable conclusion or achievement. I yield the floor.
President, before I make my unanimous consent request, I want to just reiterate that Senator Menendez and I are going to be working together on these issues, and he made this point with respect to taxes, and we're going to be able to find common ground, I believe, with Senator Crapo, who can't be here today, but is very, very strongly in support of this effort. Let me repeat that, colleagues. Senator Crapo, the ranking member on the Finance Committee, very strong for this effort. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of H.R. 4004, which was received from the House and is at the desk. I further ask that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there an objection?
Mr. President.
The senator from Arkansas.
Reserving the right to object, and I will object to this bill and to the process by which we reach this point. Several of my colleagues and I are studying this matter. This is a highly complicated 70-page agreement. It only passed out of the House last night. It's only been on the Senate floor for barely a day. We're supposed to, 15 minutes ago...
Senate be in order.
We were supposed to have recess here 15 minutes ago to go to a joint session of Congress. The Senate should not be ramming through such agreements at the very last minute without time to review them. There is more than enough time for senators and their aides over the next 2 weeks of recess to review this 70-page complicated agreement and then address it in the month of July. So I object.
President?
Objection is heard.
I will be brief because I know my colleagues want to go to the other body. I think this is very unfortunate. This is an extraordinary opportunity for our country. This is a great opportunity for the world. And the fact is, there has been extensive review of this particular proposal. The administration.
Can we have order in the Senate, please?
The administration talked to a number of members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, Catherine Tai, the ambassador. It went through the House of Representatives unanimously, and that was after every member of the relevant committee, the House Ways and Means Committee, co-sponsored the legislation. They didn't just vote for it, they co-sponsored it. And I think it is very unfortunate that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, on something that the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, Congressman Smith, and the ranking Republican on the Finance Committee, Senator Crapo, all of us have been working for months now on this particular proposal. And I think it's very unfortunate that our colleague from Arkansas has decided to object. It is his right. But I think it is very unfortunate for our country because this could have been a very, very special day with the passage of this. And we're going to be back here working together, as you heard Chairman Menendez of the Foreign Relations Committee and me and Senator Crapo. We're going to work together with every member of this body to get this very important trade initiative enacted into law. And with that, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate recess subject to the call of the chair.
Without objection.